In 200 yards, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit onto the Parkway, A312. Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway. Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile. In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway Interchange, take the second exit onto the M4 slip road to Heathrow Airport, M25.
send some, and I think this will really help.
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road. In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
This multiple rocket launchers. So two very important systems.
How many howitzers are you sending?
We are sending 7, and Netherlands are also sending, I think, a similar amount.
Doesn't sound very many.
Yeah, but you can strike very precisely. And so the Ukrainians not there to strike, and so I think it will make a difference.
And might there be more where those came from?
there might be more, but if you look at NATO, there are not so many howitzers in general. So, and it needs some training, but I think that we will see that this will have an effect.
Chancellor Scholz, there are criticism for not working more quickly, not providing more weapons faster. Why do you think he's been slow to that, and why do you think we're doing it now?
Yeah, number one, which is correct, we started to deliver later than the UK and the US. In Germany there was a very intense debate. We called it Zeitenwende, new time. It means we will spend 100 billion additional in defense. And so we had to take very important political decisions on all of that. And training takes time. Training on all the arms we are going to deliver. But they are going to come now in the coming weeks. You will see in the coming weeks quite an amount of delivery. And Andrew, to be very clear, what Germany has delivered and is going to deliver in the coming weeks is more or less the same amount as the United Kingdom.
There's been a great debate about whether or not the West, EU, NATO will stay united about this. Whether some countries might break away and try to persuade the Ukrainians to do a deal, ceding part of their territory in return for a ceasefire. What is the German view? Do you feel that you are utterly shoulder to shoulder with the British government on this? There is no fissure.
I see no problem. I can tell you the cooperation is excellent with the British government, with the United States. We are going now into the G7 summit in Elmau, where we are going to discuss also possible additional sanctions on Russia. We are then going to have the NATO summit. My feeling is that Russia, Putin personally, was extremely surprised about the strength of the Western reaction and the unity we have seen so far, and I hope it continues like that.
Now, German friends I've talked to are worried that what will happen in the winter in Germany, you get very, very cold winters in central Germany, as these much higher gas and fuel prices spike, that at that point, sort of political unity in Germany would be very much tested by this. There'll be a lot of people who put pressure on the government to pull back a bit.
I don't think this is going to happen, and we are going to have this crisis maybe earlier, because Russia has started to close the pipeline, the gas pipeline. So the German government might need to take a decision on an energy emergency in the coming days. So we will have to cut supply to some companies and to others. But my feeling is this will only strengthen the resolve. And because you asked about compromises, our view is very clear. It's Ukraine to take the decisions.
Absolutely.
Only then we will accept the outcome, no dictated peace agreement.
So could you be categorical that the German government would not accept an outcome which allowed Russia to keep a big chunk of Ukraine? They would have to withdraw completely.
That is clearly our position. It will come out of the European Council, which starts tomorrow. And as I said, it's important that peace is not dictated upon Ukraine, on Zelensky.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Kind of agreement they want to find a diplomatic solution or settle with Russia. But we will not accept anything dictated. That is very clear.
Let me turn to another diplomatic issue, the Northern Ireland Protocol. You've been very clear about what you think about the British government over Russia.
Keep right to stay on M4.
I think those people listening understand the arguments. Can I ask you something else? Can I ask you what will happen from the EU side if the British government goes ahead with this? Will there be a trade war?
I really hope that we can avoid a trade war. And I can tell you that there is a lot of disappointment with this bill, because we thought, especially because of the whole Ukraine crisis, this is not the moment to have this debate. I think this is really the feeling in Brussels and in many capitals. There is space to find a negotiated solution. So we hope that maybe after the summer break, the Commission and the British government can sit down and find a solution. We think it is possible.
Reset and start again.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you about relations between the countries post-Brexit more generally? Because you've been observing very closely imports and exports between Germany and Britain, and the volume of trade, and the position of German companies inside Britain. Just give us an overview of what you think has been going on.
Yeah, we have seen a decline over the last 5 years of trade. In total, 1/4 has been lost. We see specifically the companies producing in the United Kingdom that they are readjusting their value chains. So the Chamber of Commerce called it an industrial decoupling. So I would say we are quite concerned. Nevertheless, it's still time to take some measures. We still have around 2,500 German companies in the UK, 500,000 jobs in the United Kingdom. So we really hope that there will be some measures which will allow our companies to continue to invest and produce in the United Kingdom.
And what would you need from the British government to help that happen?
We would need different regulations on visa requirements, especially for specialized workers. We would need different regulations on logistics, and we really hope that there will be no deviation on standards.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
I hope that we will get it. And in the end, it's about jobs. It's about jobs in the United Kingdom and in Germany.
You feast on hope, Ambassador. Let me return to the Northern Ireland Protocol, because you said that you very much hoped there wouldn't be a trade war. But if Britain goes ahead with this, and
keep right to stay on M4.
Seems to be very steely about it. She seems to have the enthusiastic backing of Boris Johnson. If this goes ahead, do you think that...
Continue on M4 for 4 miles.
I would not exclude any measure, but really we don't want this to lead to any kind of additional confrontation. We want...
We're ready to do it if it has to be done.
Yeah, I would say let's sit down. Let's sit down. And if you look at this idea of green lane, we say express lane. Its similarities are quite striking. I think there is space for compromise. And I'm going personally to Northern Ireland next week because I want to have a first impression from there.
Good. New ambassador and a new chancellor. It was said by some British commentators when Chancellor Scholz came in that he was not so naturally pro-British as Angela Merkel had been. The relationship was going to be more difficult. Do you think there's any truth in that at all?
Not at all. Not at all. He was mayor of Hamburg, and I think Hamburg is maybe the most pro-British city in Germany. So I would not be concerned about that.
Back to the Hanseatic League.
Yes.
And all of that. Now, in that spirit, there is going to be, I think, there is likely to be an Anglo-German friendship treaty being signed perhaps next year. If that happens, what does it actually mean? What does a friendship treaty mean?
Yeah, so what we are currently planning for, and Chancellor Scholz invited Prime Minister to Germany, we are going to have government-to-government consultations, which would mean all the line ministries would participate, but we are not yet there that we are concretely working on a friendship agreement. I think what we want to explore are all the possibilities where we can strengthen bilateral relations. But let me say also that this requires some kind of understanding with Brussels, with the European Union, and we would really like the British government also on foreign and security policy to re-engage with Brussels and the European Union. And Ukraine has shown that we need that.
You speak slightly better English than I do, Mr. Ambassador, but I'm wondering, when you come into a new posting like this, how do you set about doing your job? You arrive, you've got your residence, you've got your embassy, you look out on a new country where you're ambassador. How do you start?
I started preparing in Germany, so with a lot of meetings, all the ministries, I wanted to know how are the relations with the United Kingdom, what can we do better, where are the challenges, for example, civil society contacts. This is reduced, twinning partnerships, school exchanges, students. There are many areas where we could do
music. We're not quite
music.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Thank you very much for coming in and talking to us. Much appreciated. Now, coming up, I'm going to be discussing how this latest wave of strikes could affect the political landscape and might actually help the Prime Minister put Labour under pressure. The time now is nearly 6:45.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Rachel Johnson.
Labour isn't working, cries the Mail. But whose job is it to end the rail strikes, Labour or those who've been in power for the last 12 years?
Rachel Johnson on LBC.
If you want to might change the world. All you need is less plastics in our oceans, less carbon in our skies, less chemicals on vegetables, less wildlife that dies. Get a carbon neutral shop delivered to your door. With Able and Coal Organic, you're getting so much more. Enjoy £10 off each of your first 3 shops of £20 or more with the code ORGANIC. ableandcoal.co.uk. Easy, organic, everything. Conditions apply.
Everyone's got a next to doppelganger, someone that looks like you.
I even shop like you.
And we both know how to make the most of our shopping. The Nectar card.
No, the Nectar app.
Eh? With Nectar you can collect and spend points at Argos and Sainsbury's.
But with the app, there's also personalised discounts and bonus points on products you buy most at Sainsbury's. Plus hundreds of brands to discover and collect points at, like eBay, Esso and Just Eat.
What?
Nectar. Get the app, get more. Personalised discounts require smart shop exclusions apply. For full T's and C's visit nectar.com/app-terms.
It all started from your kitchen table. That's where you designed the logo, wrote a business plan, and built your website. Then you took the leap and opened a shop. Had your Uncle Paul tell you, most businesses don't make it past the first year, but you breezed past the first year. Then you discovered BT's digital marketing hub, an easy way to advertise online. Suddenly you had so many new customers you had to open a second store. Take that, Paul. You do your business, we'll help you find more. Search BT.
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Bit low on cash. Why didn't you use Carmoola? It's a new way to pay for a used car. All in app, no paperwork, it takes minutes, great rates. You pay monthly. Carmoola? Why would I need that?
Breaking news, young man captured by pirates around.
Exit at junction 6.
Isn't that your son? Huh? That's definitely him. Why pay any other way? Download the app today. Carmoola.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the 3rd exit onto Tons Lane, A355.
Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Welcome back. It's 6:47 now. How will this political row about the RMT strike and the wave of strikes that will probably follow later this summer affect the fortunes of the political parties? Could they be the game changer that saves the bacon of the greased piglet? Join me to assess their political impact, Mr. Rock and Roll Politics himself, the commentator Steve Richards, alongside the very well-connected deputy political editor of The Spectator, Katie Balls. Welcome to you both. Katie, let me start with you. It was a bit of a tough gig for Keir Starmer, Prime Minister's questions today, given what's happened on the picket lines and all of that. How do you think he did?
I just think he's in a difficult position. So you could see him trying to use humour like he did last week, but ultimately...
It was better than last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was more successful than last week. Last week it felt a little bit forced. He was accused by members of his shadow cabinet suggesting he was boring people to death. So I think he worked better in that sense, but ultimately I think on strikes it is undermining his authority that we had mixed messages. And then you go to the fact that there are some...
Exit the roundabout onto Tons Lane.
He went and did join the strikers when it came to the picket lines, and I think that suggests he doesn't quite have a grip on the issue.
Steve Richards, I had 2 General Secretaries on the show a little bit earlier on, both pretty disobliging about Keir Starmer, and there's almost a sense that the political fight is leaving Labour MPs in Parliament and moving to these unions.
In a quarter of a mile, turn left towards Sippenham Lane.
A superb communicator, so it's a different kind of political mood we're into, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels quite interesting actually, partly for the reasons that you have outlined, that he is proving to be a highly effective communicator. That is rarely the case with union leaders in previous industrial disputes. That's one area where the past is no guide to what might happen next. Labour leaders of the opposition always struggle when there are industrial disputes. Most of them do roughly what Starmer has done, which is say, look, get this thing settled. But if you actually look back over time, if there is disruption,
turn left towards Sippenham Lane.
The government's in power that suffers
gets the blame.
Yeah.
Gets the blame, because I've been really interested watching, obviously, Boris Johnson. He's had all these troubles recently, and he's quite almost visibly looking around for the issue that's going to change things. And it hasn't been Ukraine, because Ukraine has gone on and on and on and has become a grinding war, as we were saying on the show earlier on. And it hasn't been Brexit, because people are getting bored of Brexit. I mean, you know, we've got the human rights thing coming up to maybe revive that, but it doesn't really cut through. And Rwanda has got stuck in the courts, and there's been terrible, miserable human stories, so it's not that. And I wonder, with this wave of strikes, because there's clearly going to...
Continue for 1.5 miles.
This is his big issue. Do you think think it is possible for him, despite what you've said, to, as it were, weaponize this so successfully that he can go to the country early, and by doing that, also keep the Tory MPs off his own back?
No. I think what you've just described, if it happens, we're in chaos, vote for us, is just not going to work. And remember, we're going back a long time now, but Ted Heath in the early 70s chose an early election over the question of who governs in the context of mayhem and strikes. And there was an assumption then that it would damage Labour fatally and help the Conservatives. And he posed the question who governs, and the electorate responded, not you. And that wasn't a great endorsement for Labour. There's no great enthusiasm for Labour now. But I don't think there's any hope that this is the issue, chaos in the coming months, that's going to give him the chance to call an early election. I'm not even sure the issue of chaos in coming months is going to work to his favour.
Very, very interesting. I actually went back on what Ted Heath actually said in February 74, the so-called Who Governs Britain speech, and it is uncannily like what's going on now. He says, do you want a government that can stay in power, keep a grip on inflation, or do you want militant trade unionism to ruin it all? Sounds very, very similar, but as you said, it went very badly for him. Of course, he was facing a very wily and formidable opponent in Harold Wilson. This is a huge test for Keir Starmer. I don't know if you saw Prime Minister's questions today. I just wondered how you thought it had gone.
I thought he did okay. It was going to be tricky for him. I'm told his office and he were very worried about the way this thing was being played out. And in that context, I thought he was much livelier and supple in the way he addressed the issue, and in a way turned the focus on, and it's the only armory he's got at the moment, which is to say, come on, get involved, sort this out. You're in government. Now, he's not as supple as Wilson in the early 70s, but I thought he did okay today, and in what for him is a tricky situation with MPs disobeying him and all the rest of it.
Well, on that, certainly we agree. Katie, let me turn back to the Conservative side of the family, which you know very well indeed. This thesis, which I'm going to doggedly carry on with, that clearly Boris Johnson wants to, as it were, exploit and weaponise these strikes and all this stuff of its Labour strikes. Your people on the picket line is figure jabbing again and again and again. One thing you can say is the Conservative Party in Parliament is more united than it's been at any point in its premiership.
Yes, and I think we have seen the government want to pick fights. Boris Johnson clearly thinks he can make political capital from that. He has in the past. And on strikes, there's unity. But I think, as we've touched on, the problem